-50. -50. And my thought was, I wonder how long it would take to freeze a ham in -50. Really, I mean, -50. I was telling Joseph this morning, I said, talking about Elon Musk, and I was talking about how Elon Musk has like $600 billion. And he's the richest man in the world. They say that he will be the first trillionaire in history. And I was like, but I can't even conceptualize that because I don't know what $600 billion is. I don't know what $1 billion is. So really, all you got to do is say he's rich, and it means the same thing to me, whether it's 600 billion or 100 million. I mean, because I don't know what either one is what. And it better be something to do with church. About what? England? They're a bunch of mamby-pambies. They are. I have no idea what temperature is there.
My cousin told me that it was colder in Ohio than it was in Alaska. It was colder here than it was in Alaska the other day.
Yeah, then Alaska?
Yeah. It was like 14 degrees in Alaska, and it was like 5 in Ohio.
I don't know. You remember a few years back, well, it's been more than a few years back, when I was in college, so this had to have been the winter of, 2012. I used to drive an ice cream truck when I was in college, and there was one day, and we actually went to Bartlesville driving the ice cream truck, but one day was 30 degrees below zero here in Nowata, but then the next day was 72 degrees. So in a 24-hour period, there was a difference of 100 degrees in one 24-hour period. That seems crazy. But the good news is, I was looking at the weather forecast for next week. Anybody looked at the weather forecast for next week yet?
60s.
So on Friday, I think it is supposed to be 69 degrees.
Which is great for farming.
Mine too. In fact, I tried to wash it the other day, but all the car washes were still closed because everybody's water was froze. But so there, the good thing is the cold only lasts a short time. And I still have to say that I would much rather have 15 degrees outside right now than 130 in July. I mean, man, I can't handle the heat like that. But this morning, what I was, I pulled up to church and I sat out in my truck for a while, and I had a dream last night. I had a dream a couple days ago, and I woke up thinking, man, that's a great, God gave me this message to preach, and I thought, that's a great message. I'm going to preach it. That's going to be so good. And by morning, all I remembered about the dream was that I had it. I don't remember a single thing that happened in the dream. And so I've been kind of fretting that, and man, what was it? I know I was supposed to preach it. But this morning, I woke up with another dream, and I don't know if it was the same dream I had the other day because I still don't remember the first one. But I woke up with this dream that God wanted me to preach today, and thinking about this, though, my title today is, This is Not a Theory, This is Power. Romans 1:16 says, For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. Acts 1:8 says, But ye shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem, in all Judea, and in Samaria, and unto the uttermost parts of the earth. That was Acts 1:8. And then one more verse I want to read is out of Luke chapter 4. And verse 18 says, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, and to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. When the apostolic gospel began to spread worldwide, it wasn't because there was amazing orators. It wasn't because people spoke so well. It wasn't because people heard and just thought, man, I got to get me some of that. It was because the people that were going from one place to the next weren't just taking words. They weren't just taking what they heard, but they were taking things that they had experienced. They were taking things that they had seen. They were healed themselves, or they had saw somebody that they knew was healed. They saw somebody that was crippled before, and because of what they saw, were no longer crippled. They were carrying passion. They weren't just carrying words. And I was sitting back here while they were singing, and I started to think about some things. I had to sit down and look up because, you've heard me say this before, but do you know why? The 4 Gospels tell the same stories mostly, right? Do you know why all 4 stories are different? Different points of view. Man, we read what Luke had to say, and Luke was a physician. So obviously the way that he saw something was different than what Matthew had. What was Matthew? Matthew was a tax collector. His only expertise was learning how to steal from people and rob. Luke had a different perspective because he wanted to see how to make people better. He saw things differently. So when we read them, they're different. We can hear people preach the same message, and the same message may or will always be different because no 2 people are the same. The way that they see that is different than the way that maybe somebody else sees it. So I was thinking this morning with these scriptures about power and how we've been given power and we will be endued with power and we receive power. And I was thinking about why we don't see that power anymore. Why we see things that are just so seemingly watered down from what they used to be. And now my educational background is in addictions. So I immediately started to see things in light of like addiction. But I was sitting out here in my truck and man, this little Mustang drives by. Used to, when we see something that was not right, something that was evil, something wicked, people would put a stop to it. They know people didn't like it. They didn't like knowing that kind of stuff existed, right? But everybody remember the Salem witch trials? We don't remember them. I wasn't there, but I remember reading about them. Anybody remember reading about them, the Salem witch trials? What happened? Man, not even finding somebody who is performing witchcraft, but man, just the very mention of somebody. There were people, anybody hear the phrase knock on wood? Man, somebody saw a woman knock on wood, just like the way we use it. Man, we don't want that to happen, knock on wood. What's that mean? It's a superstition, but why do we do it? Well, that was part of the witch trials, but they saw somebody knocking on wood. She must be a witch. Why is she knocking on wood? Do you know what happened to her? They burnt her at the stake because they didn't want to take a chance of allowing wickedness to run free. They used to take, you know what trichinacia is? Man, people that were mentally ill, that acted out, I'm not talking like depressed, but people that acted out, like a schizophrenic. Yes, that's a good example. A schizophrenic. They will, they hear voices, and nobody can see where these voices are coming from, including, and this is a big misconception. People think that this isn't the case, but a schizophrenic cannot see where those voices are coming from. A schizophrenic only hears those voices. So they don't see somebody. They're not talking to somebody. They hear somebody, but they don't see them. But if somebody were to exhibit behavior like that, it was called trichinacia. They would drill a hole in their head to allow evil spirits to escape their head, to escape their mind. Drill a hole right through their skull and into their brain to allow evil spirits to escape their mind. Because they didn't want to take a chance. Sawyer, you better wake up, bro. They did not want to allow evil spirits the chance or the opportunity to work in this world. Then that's my next point that I'm getting to. She said, well, if they drill a hole in their skull, what if they died? Well, they would then take those people and throw them in the river or throw them in the pond. And if they lived, then they were successful in letting the evil spirits go. However, most times they died. But they didn't want to take a chance of allowing wickedness in this world. I was sitting out here a while ago, and a little red Mustang drove by, a cruddy-looking little vehicle, but it had devil horns on top of the car. And I saw that, and I thought, how stupid is that, first off, that somebody would do something like that? But then second of all, when did it become okay that we look at stuff like that and say, oh, well, that's kind of cute? Or when did companies start making stuff like that and we don't burn them to the ground? I mean, used to wickedness, anything that appeared evil, we would eradicate. But after a while, it become less and less and less. And, the witch trials, do you know what they used to do to the witches, aside from burning them at the stake? They would press them. This is almost unimaginable. But they would take somebody who they thought was a witch, and every day they would put more stuff on top of her, or him. Why do we always assume witches are women? I guess it just seems natural. But every day they would put something else. They put wood. They would put things on top. They put something flat, but they put something on top of her every day to press her. And over the course of several days, she would finally just die. And over time, and I'm not saying that we should do that, okay? Don't get me wrong. But over time, they stopped doing that. It seemed to be less bad, I guess, than what they had originally seen these things. And over time, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be harsh. We're not going to allow those things to happen. And so by doing that, it became more normal. There were more people like that. Now there are people that claim to be witches everywhere. The girls used to tell me all the time their mother was a witch. Their grandmother was a witch. It become acceptable that people were doing these things that not long ago we looked at as absolutely evil and had to be stopped. Well, as I said, I see things in terms of addiction a lot of times, and now this sounds bad to be relating our spiritual walk with addiction, but I want to do this and hopefully a couple of things. Number one, it will help us understand addiction better, and number two, it will help us to see kind of why our lives are the way they are. When I first got into church, first off, I thought it was crazy. I thought, man, well, I grew up going to a Baptist church, and so when I first started going to a Pentecostal church to see the differences, I thought it was just nuts, the way people acted, the way people, were running around, the way people were yelling, the way people were raising their hands. I thought, what is the point of all this? It didn't seem normal. And with this, now I'm going to liken that to addiction. Over time, me continuing to be in church, and I was only going back to church because I wanted to see what weird thing they were going to do next. Man, I wanted to see how much weirder they were going to be. So I would go back, and over time, those really weird things become less weird. And after a while, almost became normal. Addiction is that same way. When people first start doing things that they become addicted to, first off, one thing people don't understand about addiction is nobody wakes up this morning saying, you know what, I think I'm going to become addicted to meth today. Nobody says, I think that I'm going to go out and get hooked on crack. Nobody does that. When I was a kid, I started smoking. I was 11 years old. And I didn't even know what addiction was then. But the first time I first started smoking, I didn't know that people like inhaled, like, you know what I mean? I mean, so you inhale, but then inhale it into your lungs. So it was different. So like, it was different. And I didn't know that. I had smoked for a while, I thought. And one of my friends is like, no, he's like, you got to inhale that. I was like, what are you talking? I am. No, it's got to go into. So he's like, when you do that, go. And man, I did that, and that stuff went in my lungs. I thought I was going to die. Man, I was sick. I thought I was going to die. And it felt weird. Why would people do that? But you know what? I kept doing it and kept doing it and kept doing it. Like I said, I started when I was 11. I quit when I was 22. So for 11 years, I did that stuff. And I never thought about becoming addicted, never thought about being addicted, really, even while I was. Never thought about it. But our lives are that same way with everything. When we start going to church, I started going to church, and man, even though it felt strange, it felt different. It was different than what I was used to. I kept going back, and I kept going to that place where I would experience that strangeness. I would experience that difference, and I kept going, and over time, it got to where it wasn't so much different anymore. I expected it. I expected who was going to run around, and who was going to shout, and who was going to do whatever it was they were going to do, and it become normal to me, and we expect that every week, and we go into church, and man, when we leave and nobody has done that, we leave saying, man, service wasn't the same today. Well, we didn't have that same kind of, the Spirit didn't show up like it did last month, and then you find yourself later, sometimes weeks or months or years out, and you're saying, you know what, I haven't felt like that like we did when I first started going to church. Much like another addiction. You know, I have talked before about what addiction is and how addiction is, when withdrawals are. When we go through withdrawals, people think that it is different than what it is. But what a withdrawal is when you're addicted to something, your body craves, we call it homeostasis, which is balance. It wants to be balanced. And when you have not done something for a while, people begin to go into withdrawals. And what those withdrawals are is your body becomes used to, just like we're used to eating, right? If you eat lunch at noon every day, around noon every day, you start to tell yourself, man, I'm hungry. It's not necessarily your body saying you're hungry, but it's your mind saying, it's time to eat. I'm used to eating right now. So we start to feel hunger pangs, and we start to feel this hunger, and addiction's the same way. Withdrawals are the same way. Your body knows that normally at this time in this environment, you're using whatever substance, whether it's food or it's a drug or it's caffeine or whatever it is. So your body, to get back up to balance, to get back up to normal, if you use meth speeds the body up, right? Well, when your body is going into withdrawals from meth, your body slows everything down because it's waiting on you to do something to raise it back up. That's the reason you've heard of addiction tolerance, that when you've done something for a while, you have to have more of that in order to get the same effect that you did before, because your body's got used to that. It has lowered the level. It has brought that threshold down, and so now you have to have more to get to what you had the same before. So when your body is used to a substance that's going to change, it will lower itself in order that when you use that substance, it's going to bring you back up to normal and you're not feeling that high anymore. This world is drowning with knowledge. And that seems crazy, right? Knowledge should be a good thing, right? It should be. I would think knowledge would be a good thing. But never before, well, I mean, the last 20 years, it's been this way. But, if you tell me something that doesn't sound right, man, I'm going to pick up my phone, and while we're sitting there talking, I'm going to Google it. And I'm going to find the answer to whatever you're telling me, and I'm going to show you just so I can tell you, see, you're not as smart as you think you are. You see that? You're not as smart as you think you are. We have infinite knowledge at our fingertips. We are able to find information to anything we want. The problem with that is that having that kind of knowledge, it waters you down to everything else. When I can read about things that will give me all the information I want, but I'm not seeing an effect, then we get to where we just, yeah, I've heard that before. You ever feel like that? Man, there are people everywhere that are going into the world, and they're doing their best to invite people to church. They're talking to people, they're telling people about the same things that they were told about. So you know what, if I'm healed, when I tell you about it, it's a little bit different than you telling somebody else about me being healed, right? Man, you begin to speak with things with a passion, something that somebody else can do that because it wasn't them that were healed. They don't feel the same way that you did when you were healed. Now they can tell, man, it was an awesome thing to hear. I saw them go through that transformation. I saw them change their lives. And one person down the line, they may feel that same kind of power when you're talking to them. But that second person or that third person, man, it's just like any other hearsay that I can look up and read about that online. Man, think about it. If you were to pick up your phone right now and just type in people who were healed by Jesus. You know how many millions of pages it's going to bring up? And do you think you're going to get anything from reading these millions of pages? Man, I love being in church. When we first started, when Michelle and I first got married, even if we didn't have a night service, we would drive somewhere to go to a night service. We wanted all of it we could get. We wanted to somewhere we were going to be in church. If there was a revival going on, we would drive hours to get to revivals. We couldn't get enough of it. Just like an addiction. You can't get enough of it. It's something that even that addiction, you may not realize it at the time, but it is life-changing. Being in the presence of God is life-changing. Feeling the power, seeing somebody healed, being healed yourself, being convicted, it brings something in that makes you want more. But when somebody else is telling you about somebody else who heard about somebody else who heard that somebody they knew was healed, it has less of effect on us. We don't get that same kind of power from that because, man, you don't have the same kind of power. The Bible tells us that we are made overcomers by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. Somebody else's testimony that somebody else is telling about, man, just doesn't seem quite the same. We are drowning with knowledge. There's so much information, so much knowledge everywhere. And to be honest, we really just don't know how to use it. We read it, and knowledge, I've always heard knowledge is power. Anybody heard that before? Knowledge is power. Man, we should get power out of knowledge. We should learn things from information. But there's so much of it, if we don't know how to apply that information, then we're not going to get much out of that. The Word of God, the apostolic message, did not spread across the world just by people talking about it. It was because people that it was actually happening to were going into these next neighborhoods. They were going into these next cities. They were getting on boats and going to islands and going to other countries and going places and telling them about the things that they had experienced. And they were talking about this with such a passion, people were able to feel the power of God. What they were seeing and hearing was authentic. It was real. It was not something. How many people watch Facebook Reels or TikTok? I watch Facebook Reels sometimes when I'm like stupid bored. And you see well, not even just Reels anymore, I guess just on Facebook. You see so much stuff and read so much stuff and watch videos. Now, obviously, there is a video, and I should have sent one to Tish to show on the screen. Anybody seen the new app that they're using on Facebook Reels that, like, you can put in a picture of a baby or this one, this is going to sound bad, but a really big woman, looked like a sumo wrestler kind of woman, and they got her up, and she's, like, dancing and doing, it's this app that they use. You can do a baby. People do dogs with it, and they do this pit bull who's got his arm, and it's dancing, and it's just having a good time. Well, that is fake when you see it. But there's so much stuff that we see online now that we look at and be like, is that fake or is it real? Could that it's possible it could have happened. But it's also possible and very plausible that it's fake. See, when people hear us talk about things that happen in church and we're telling somebody else's story, that's the same thing that an unbeliever thinks when we're telling them is, well, that could have happened, but there's also a very good likelihood that that's not real. People are not willing to change their lives most times over something that they think is possible didn't really happen. It is so important that when we hear, or that when God talks to us, when God shows us things, when we are healed, that we take our own story as the wealthy man had the dinner. You go out into the hedges, the highways, and the byways, that we have to tell this story and compel people to come in and hear what God is saying to the church. Because if we don't have people that are willing to go out and tell an authentic message, the power is not really there. I want you to think about the things that we read in the Bible, the things that we look at and say, man, that is an awesome story. That person did great things. Who was the greatest apostle in the Bible? Who do we call the greatest apostle? Apostle Paul. Why do we call Paul the greatest apostle? Is it because he wrote the most? I don't think it's because he wrote the most. I don't even think it's because he went the most places. I think likely the reason that Paul that we know him as the greatest apostle is Peter, while he was uneducated and not very intelligent, he was a fisherman. We don't read of a bad life of Peter beforehand, right? I mean, we hear about how Peter may have been rough, that he probably was, maybe he cussed a little bit, but we don't hear how Peter was a murderer, do we? But Paul, before Paul came in contact with God, Paul had Stephen killed. Paul was a big part of a lot of evil things that were going on in the world. So when God came in contact with Paul, Paul made a great transformation, and he was able to go into places where people had known Paul from before and say, look what God has done in my life, and they will look at him and say, man, it's amazing to see the kind of change that we see out of Paul. If God can change that man who was killing his own brethren before, what else can God do? Paul had a testimony that none of the other guys had. As I said a while ago, my background of education is in addictions. Now, one thing I lack is other than smoking when I was a kid, I've never done any drugs. I've never been high. I've never done this stuff. And so when I talk to people about addiction, almost invariably what I hear is, what kind of addictions have you battled? What kind of stuff have you done? And when I tell the truth, do you know what I hear? Over and over. You've never dealt with a drug addiction. How are you going to talk to me about that? You've never done this kind of stuff. How are you going to come and tell me what I need to do to get away from that? Even though I have empirical knowledge, even though I can point to textbooks and say, this is what happened, this is where, this is how, this is why, somebody that has experience doesn't want to know the empirical data. They want to know hands-on. How do we deal with it? How did you deal with it? What did you so I don't have the same kind of authority as somebody who maybe spent 20 years in a meth addiction that is now telling people how to get off of it. Do you know, people that have been addicted to things can go to, like, the Department of Human Services and make as much money as I do. They have no kind of degree, but what they do have is experience. They can become peer support specialists, just talking about how they broke free of certain things, how they were victims of domestic violence and they got away from that, or how they were meth users and over years they learned how to get away from that, and I've stayed clean this long and now I'm here to help you. And they'll pay them well to do that. It's important that when we are telling people about the power, the might, and the majesty of God, it's not something we've heard other people talk about. It has to be things that we've experienced. It has to be things that we have seen. It can't be just another watered down story of things that people have read or things that people can look up. There's so much information out there. We need somebody that will go in with passion and talk about their vulnerabilities. One of the hardest things to do is talk about your vulnerabilities. You ever tried to talk with somebody or counsel somebody or just be there for somebody and they start crying? Man, I cannot handle somebody crying. I'm a fixer. I have to fix things. Well, what's going to make you stop crying? Let me get you tissue. Let me get you this. Let me tell you a joke. Let me make you laugh. Let me do something to stop you from crying. But how do you feel that somebody is most real with what they're talking about when you can see that emotion, you can see that stress, you can see the things that they've went through on their face, you can hear it in their voice, and that tells you that what they're talking about is real, or most times we think it is. You know, I read a story about a televangelist, and reading it, I kept thinking, man, that can't be real. It can't be real. You know, the AI does so much anymore that almost everything you read online anymore is fake, it seems. And the things that are not fake, we find ourselves believing they are fake because everything else has been fake. But I was reading about this televangelist, or even different than that. I was reading about these different country music singers and talking about how they changed their life by doing certain things. And man, I read this one and I thought, that was really inspirational. That was awesome to read that. But then the next day, I read the exact same story about a different artist. And then the next day, read it about a different artist. And I thought, man, what are the odds that Eminem, who's not a country artist, well, I guess he kind of is now. He's got a country album. But what are the odds that Eminem and Tim McGraw and Garth Brooks all called this same person up on stage because they were holding up a poster when they were a child, and they paid for them to go to Yale, and now they're back at their concert. And I was like, it's crazy. I mean, why do people do that stuff? Why do people talk about that kind of stuff? Why do people create that kind of content? Number one, they get paid to do that, because when you click on that, it's going to take you to a page with other ads, and those advertisers are paying those people so that you're seeing their ads. But there's more to it than that, I think, because we also read, well, number one, we love to see somebody who's successful fail for some reason. I don't know why. It's human nature. You see somebody who has more than you, and so many people hate that person because they have more than they do. So it's natural, people think, to hate on people because they've done well. They can't be real. They can't be honest. That has to be corruption. It's ridiculous that we look for ways to be able to talk about people failing. But I was reading about this one specific televangelist, and a lot of people love him, obviously, or he wouldn't have a television show and a church of like 20 million people. But because he has a very large church, a lot of people hate him. A lot of people can only talk about how bad he is. And reading about that evangelist and talking about all the ways that he has stolen from thousands and thousands of people, what does it do? Any televangelist, number one, I'm going to name a bunch of them, and I bet anybody here can tell me negative stories, several of them, about any one of them. T.D. Jakes. You might know good things about T.D. Jakes? You might know bad things about T.D. Jakes? No? I could tell you a bunch. Creflo Dollar. Yeah. Joel Osteen. Jimmy Swaggart. I can tell you negative stories about every single one of them, multiple negative stories. A lot of them may not even be true. But why would those stories be out there if they're not true? It discredits church. Now, T.D. Jakes, use him for an example. T.D. Jakes moved to Dallas, Texas from Virginia. He pastors the world's largest Pentecostal church, reaching literally millions of people, used to, every week. Millions of people every week. When he moved to Dallas, Texas, and started the Potter's House, 1,500 people followed him from Virginia to move all the way across the country to Dallas, Texas to start that church. Man, that sounds very positive, doesn't it? That 1,500 people would believe in him enough that they would drop their lives in Virginia and move to Dallas, Texas to start a church. They believed in this man that would become their pastor so much. They would uproot their lives, they would leave their jobs, they would leave their families, and move to Texas to be part of this church that they thought was going to change the world. Man, that's inspirational to me. I hear stuff like that, and I think, man, he had to have done amazing things. Those people really had faith in him. But then we start to hear all of the other stuff, the negative stuff, the bad stuff, and we don't know if it's real or not, because I don't know anybody that knows T.D. Jakes. So how do we know the stuff that we're hearing is real? You know, how much bad stuff can you say about people have heard about Joel Osteen? Man, he takes so much money from his church. He just rips those people off. He does this. And now, Joel Osteen does not preach truth. He doesn't. In fact, the stuff he does say is true. It's Bible. But it's a very small part of the Bible, and he doesn't teach what it's going to take to make it to heaven. However, seeing the things that Joel Osteen teaches infuriates people. So people begin to say stuff. They talk about how he takes so much money from the church. Joel Osteen has never taken a dime from his church. Joel Osteen has written, 10 number one New York best time-selling books. He produces music. He has a part in producing movies. He is a millionaire in his own right and doesn't take a dime from the church. But people talk about how much he takes from the church, how they've got rich off of that. And I don't care whether he has or not. That's not my point. My point is that people will, the devil of this world will put things in motion, people saying things to discredit your stories, the things that you're going to tell, discredit people who are reaching people with any kind of semblance of truth, anything that would keep them from just being flat out evil in this world. He wants to discredit that to keep people skeptical about the word. So when you tell people what has happened in church, when you tell people what they've done, what God has done for you, they're listening and they're being polite and maybe, oh yeah, really, that's awesome, that's awesome. You know what? Yeah, man, that's great. I'm going to be in church on Sunday. And then Sunday comes around and they're not there. And then Monday we go back to the office and we're going to talk to them about, man, what happened? I wonder why they weren't at church. And now they avoid us because they've had too much doubt sown into their lives to believe in these things that sound like fairy tales. The things that we take to the people of this world has to be authentic. If we're talking about other stuff that, and a big part of that is, let me ask you a question. How many people have told you they're going to be in church Sunday and then not show up? I had somebody call me day before yesterday. Man, I'm going to be there Sunday. I'm so excited. God's doing this, and God's doing this, and God's doing this. And I got here this morning, and we still got 19 minutes before church traditionally lets out. They're still not here. They could show up. What I mean by that, the reason I say that, things happen, and it could be legitimate, the reason they're not here, but the reason I say that is the things in your life, when you tell people something, when you tell people what God has done in your life and then you show something different, you live a different life. People look at your life and say, man, if I can't believe what he said here, how can I believe what they were talking about over here? The way we live our lives is telling. The things that we do in our lives is telling. If I'm talking to somebody that is telling me, man, you're right on, I'm behind you, I support you, but then other people call me and say, hey, man, just want to let you know, Joe Schmo was saying this about you. I'm thinking, man, that dude was just telling me he was behind me and supported me. And now he's calling other people. Are you going to go back to that person? Is that person going to be your confidant anymore? Is that somebody you can talk to? No. They look at us the same way. When we're telling people about the power of God, and then they see the power of evil working in our life, they're probably not going to believe what you said about the power of God. It's so important that the things that we take into this world are things that people can believe in. The things that, and they don't believe in somebody else's story. I've told you guys this, and you probably don't feel the same way about it as I did when I heard it, but my pastor in Tulsa, his wife was telling us, and you guys all know them, I think, but his wife was telling us about their granddaughter. She was sick. She was in the hospital. They were going to do surgery, and she for some reason had chronic pneumonia, would not go away. In the hospital for weeks at a time, and just kept happening and kept happening. This little girl, she was, if I remember right, 6 or 7. It's been a while. That's been what, 15 years? But supposed to have surgery, and doctor goes in and is telling, okay, this is what we're going to do, and little girl says, Jesus was here last night and he prayed for me. And it was a cute story, everybody, oh, that's so sweet, but then she's telling her mom, I don't want to have surgery, Mom. Jesus touched me. And the doctor says, no, we still need to have surgery. We still got to do this. And at first, Mom was telling the baby, hey, you know what? We still got to do this. That's great. Jesus touched you, but we've still got to do this. We got to make you better. And the little girl was insistent. No, Jesus was here. And Mom said, how about let's do x-rays one more time. well, that's just a waste. That, we've got to get this done. Mom said, no, we're going to do this one more time. Let's do x-rays one more time. So they took the little girl and did x-rays one more time. And right in the middle of this, she told this story so clearly that, no, Jesus was here. He put his hand on my chest and prayed for me. I feel good. I don't have that. I don't have that stuff in my lungs anymore. And then when they're telling this in church, this is somebody who talked to the person that was telling, it was her granddaughter. So when she was telling us, she had a passion. Man, what she was telling us, you could hear in her voice. It was very real. So it meant something to us. Now, when I tell that, I don't have that same passion. So for somebody else to hear that, that sounds cool, but man, I'm not sure if I can believe that or not. They did the x-rays, and there was nothing in this little girl's lungs. But over the x-ray was a hand. Just like the little girl said, Jesus touched me. He put his hand on my chest and prayed for me. And they did that x-ray, and the nurses that saw it, they come back in talking to Mom. Now, this is the story I was told. I can't say I wasn't there. But they came back in there talking. The nurse was said, it's unbelievable. This is amazing. This happened. And the hand being there, it had to have been God. There was no bones in the hand. Just a hand in the x-ray. And it touched that nurse. They saw something in that x-ray that changed that nurse's life. Now, they saw that. So that changed them. When I tell this, do you feel that you're going to go out and conquer the world with that story? I don't have the same kind of passion they did. Man, your story can only be told by you. And if you're not telling your story, you're not letting your story be known. Somebody's not hearing what God has done in your life, what God is doing through you. It doesn't do any good for me to tell your story. But when you tell your story, when you tell your story, it can change people. So Hori always tells me not to talk about her when I'm preaching. My boys used to do the same thing. My wife always does the same thing. And you know what? I haven't stopped yet. But Sohori has lived with us for, working on 1.5 years now. Sohori's life has been considerably changed. And one day, Sohori will have a story to tell that nobody else can tell it the same way she can. And she'll have to make a decision whether she tells that story and is able to impact somebody's life, or whether she wants to keep that to herself and let people go that she could touch, that she could change their life, she could give hope. It's up to you whether you tell your story. It's up to you whether you give your testimony. It's up to you whether you want to change somebody's life. But know that God gave you that. It's not your story to keep. God, He says He gave us that testimony that we would tell other people what God has done for us. It's so important that, I have faith in things I see, things that we've experienced. When I say see, I don't mean I physically have to see it to believe it. But when I say see, if I see God heal you, I have faith in that. I know that happened, right? You believe in that. That's something you've experienced. It's so important that we have faith. So I can tell stories that other people have told, and I don't have the same kind of faith in those stories as I do something that I've seen, something I've experienced, something I've touched. Faith is so important in our lives and in our testimonies. Jesus healed a blind person, and before He did, He asked them, do you believe I can do this? There's no doubt. You're God. I know you can do this. And what happened when He first healed him? Anybody tell me what first happened? When He healed the blind person. Not right away. There's always going to be the devil there to give you some doubt. So initially, when He first healed that blind person, the first thing but he couldn't see clearly. He could see men as trees, just stuff. He couldn't really tell what it was. He could see something. But he persisted in belief, and then he could see clearly. If the devil can rob you of your testimony and tell you what you have just experienced, what you have just felt is not real, that maybe you haven't received a healing that you should have received because God doesn't have that power, you're not going to tell somebody, well, I was almost healed one time. Man, I was going to church and I was almost saved. You're not going to tell people that. If the devil can make you doubt your testimony, he will. If the devil can make you doubt that God has changed your life, he will. When he asked that person, do you believe I can do this? If that person had said, no, I don't, that person would have walked away still blind. If that person would have came back and said, you told me I was going to see, but all I can see is figures, that person would have walked away again blind. Us being able to testify, us being healed, us being able to reach people requires an element of faith in us that only comes from God. I told a story one time about a pastor's wife, that when we prayed for her, she was healed. Man, she had rheumatoid arthritis. And if anybody has known anybody with rheumatoid arthritis, then they know rheumatoid arthritis. My mother died with rheumatoid arthritis. It was part of the disease she had. But you know it's not something that feels good. It's not something that you really ever have good times. It is something that is debilitating. We prayed for this woman, and that night, man, she was able to move. She had no problem. She felt great. She should have been shouting about the goodness of God. But instead was talking about, well, you know what, I think right now I'm probably going to be hurting in the morning. This is going to feel terrible tomorrow, but right now I am able to move my hands. Rather than giving God glory for what she was feeling, she was letting the devil put doubt in her mind and accepting that. And the next morning, she was right. Man, she couldn't move. That woman's younger than me, right? Is she younger than me? She doesn't work. She can't work because she can't hardly move. God healed her. But she wasn't willing to accept that healing. She allowed the devil to sow doubt into her mind, into her heart. And because of that, she was not able to accept what God was trying to do in her body. It's a sad, sad thing to see somebody. It's almost like winning the lottery, or like Ed McMahon showing up at your door with that giant check. It's like, look what you just won. You won $10 million. And then he steps back and is like, oh, I'm sorry. I meant to go to your neighbor's house. Nobody can preach authenticity better than the person that it happened to, better than the person that experienced it, better than somebody who has the knowledge, has seen what God has done. If that doesn't come from people in the church, if that doesn't come from you telling people what God's done for you, how will we ever reach these people who already doubt everything? The devil has sown so much doubt, put so much doubt in the world. And we see things are only getting worse. You'll notice things are not getting better. Things in this world only get worse. As much as we complained about television, you know what's happened? We complained so much about how bad television was. So now, does anything even come on TV anymore? Everything now is streaming. I haven't seen a television like a television station in years. Have we watched television? No, we don't have to. No. So everything we watch, we stream. You know what the difference between television and streaming is? You would think streaming things, we are better able to control what we see, right? It got worse. Shows that we watched on television, anybody watch Criminal Minds? I love Criminal Minds. But when Criminal Minds went off of network TV and came back on to streaming, they never said cuss words. They never had foul language. They never, now there's homosexuality. Now there's, every word is an F word. I mean, everything is bad. It's worse. And even if we say, well, we're only going to watch things that have a G rating. Michelle and I went to the movies years ago, and we were watching, it was a Bible show. It was a church type movie. And the previews they're showing were despicable. And I sent an email. I was like, I can't believe you showed this during this kind of a movie. And they emailed back and be like, look, these were approved for everybody to see. It doesn't matter what the movie is. We show them to everybody. The commercials they put on. You can be watching a perfectly family-oriented show. And the commercials they put on are going to blow you away. This world is only getting worse, and there's only being more and more doubt sown every single day. There are more and more people that are making a decision every day, a determination whether they are going to go to heaven or they are going to go to hell. And they don't know that. But the relationship with you could be what helps them make that decision. There was a guy I talked to at the gym a while back, and I didn't invite him to church. I'm not real proud of saying that. That sounds bad. I didn't invite him when we were talking. I didn't just walk away and be like, hey, man, hope you have a warm day in hell, or anything like that. But I was talking to him, and he asked me, he's like, where do you go to church at? And I told him, and he told me, man, you know what, we're going to show up. We're going to be there Sunday. And he hasn't shown up, but I never even said anything to him about church. But there's a difference in people that go to church and people who don't. And that guy picked up on that difference. And now they go to church somewhere that is a more worldly church and do things a lot different than us, and that may be why he hasn't shown up. But people they feel something different about you when you are sold out to God. When you are a godly person, they feel something different. God is giving you favor with people, and how you use that is up to you. It's so important this morning that we are determined that we're going to reach people with a testimony that God gave us. It's important that we make a decision that we are going to share what God has given us. Cold? She's over here. It's important that we make a decision. Are we going to make the decision today that we will allow things to just keep going as they are? That we're perfectly content with the few people that show up at church? Or are we going to start going out? And I'm not talking about how many people come to church. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that we are reaching people that will not end up in hell because we've made a difference in their life. Because we have showed them what God's able to do. God told when he would heal people, you go. There was only a couple of times he said, you don't tell anybody about this. But he said, you go tell them what you've seen. Man, the person when Peter and John walking to the temple, at the gate called Beautiful, and the beggar who was there and couldn't even get up off his, I don't know, I always thought of it as like a little creeper. One of those things you get on and crawl underneath your car, you know. But they come, and this guy's begging for money, and Peter said, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, give I thee. He says, in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. And the Bible says immediately his ankle bones received strength, and he leapt up. And everywhere he went, he was telling people what had just happened to him. The woman at the well, when Jesus told her, yeah, you say you have no husband, but in reality you have 5, and the one you're with now is not yours. She went and told people what she was told, what she saw, what she felt. People came to that. They felt the authenticity of that, and they wanted to be part of that. People need to hear your story, no matter what it is. There's no testimony we have that is insignificant. Now, as I said a while ago, people will ask me, well, how are you going to talk to us about addiction? Maybe they won't get anything from me by me telling them empirically what they need to do. But I can talk to people about how to stay away from those things that will ensnare them. I can tell people about staying away from the things that will cause their life ruin. God has given you a testimony to use. He has given you a testimony to take into this world. It's up to you to do that. It's up to you to do that. Who will you share your testimony with? Stand with me this morning. We have been given a testimony to reach this world with. And